Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cottar. I am a Kenyan. We live in Olterekesi Group Ranch, just adjacent to the Masai Mara National Reserve, which you can see is right below me here, 1 kilometer from my camp. I'm here to talk about the issues of wildlife conservation in Kenya and why resource rights is so important for wildlife to survive. What is clear in Kenya is that policies are not working. The policies that ensure wildlife is not owned by landowners, that ensure that policies are decided by very few people at the top of government and some wildlife NGOs also. Here are the facts on the ground. Kenya is losing wildlife at up to 4% per annum, starting from a base of maximum 800,000 megafauna in the entire country. Okay, for 3 months of the year we do get about 700 up to 1 million animals from Tanzania during the migration period, but then they go back. And even that population is reducing by 30% because of the closing down of range for this population of migration of wildebeest out to the north when they get into Kenya, beyond the Mara Game Reserve. So what we are seeing is a catalysm, because wildlife at 4% loss per annum, other than elephant, apparently, that is pretty bad news. But what is even more frightening is that land use change is happening at a rate of up to 8% per annum. 8% per annum literally means that there is no space for elephant or wildlife in the future. So the landowners of Kenya harbour up to 70% of the country's wildlife numbers. With landowners suffering cost of this wildlife, they have no choice if they cannot make that wildlife a benefit to their livelihood income. A lot of people would say, well, tourism is a great benefit and potentially could be expanded out to secure wildlife. This is not the case because tourism is extremely monopolized. It is monopolized to the degree that 95% at least is on national parks and reserves. That is where the lodges are. That's where the tour operators send their clients, is to lodges within national parks and reserves. And number two, the selling chain takes all the money. The selling chain means the commissions to agents. That can be up to 40% in some cases. Whereas in reality, landowners get as little as 0.2% of the gross takings from tourism. This will not change unless the government stipulates that tourism developments move out of parks and reserves. I do not think that that will happen because of the political patronage of lodges by the politicians themselves. Why would they change? Then there is the wildlife NGO business, which earns billions of dollars a year, but clearly does not result in positive outcomes because we have 4% loss of wildlife per year. So, sustainable use. Kenya has just gone very hardline in a preservation mode. That means that it is not even an option. And in fact, if anything, the cry for devaluing wildlife is stronger and stronger by the minute, by organizations like Wildlife Direct, I4, etc. So where do we go from here? I would propose that we have to value wildlife by proxy. And by proxy I mean we value the land that wildlife is on. Now in the Mara here we have a scheme between 8 conservancies where we pay for environmental services. It is all funded by tourism at the moment. Out of 170 lodges in the Mara, 25 are actually putting towards the scheme. It's securing up to 290,000 acres. It's about 60% of the entire Masai Mara Game Reserve land area we have secured outside. But this is all fair and well, but when tourism is such a fickle business with security concerns and Ebola, these sort of things can knock tourism down very badly. And I think all of Africa was affected by Ebola. For me, I think that the answer lies in payment for environmental services to rural landowners, whereby they get livelihood income on a regular monthly basis, and this money has to be sourced from somewhere. This money, I put it to you that this money should come from private sector, multinationals and high net worth people from the first world or developed world that get some kind of special tax rebate for leasing land in Africa and Asia and South America, frankly. So this is a way to actually make payment for environmental services a business decision by these big entities, these big companies. There is trillions of dollars sitting in bank accounts just earning interest. Okay, bring that interest out here. So they have their endowment funds, effectively. The interest comes onto the land in Africa. They get 100% tax rebates. And I think that this could even tie in with the Sustainable Development Goals of those nations. The development goals that I understand require 0.7% of each developed country's GDP to be paid to third world countries, which they have never met during the Millennium Fund. Only one country, I believe, has truly met those goals. But private sector payments to PES, if it were to count towards those nations' sustainable development goals, that could change that whole scenario. It's a win-win for everyone, but particularly for the rural African living with wildlife. So let's go back to if we don't do something in this vein. Literally, at the rate of loss of wildlife and at the rate of loss of land or wildlife habitat, we will have to remove 20,000 elephants in the next 10 to 20 years entirely. They will not be able to fit in the land available to them because the poor rural people are going to convert that land to monoculture or agriculture. So we have no time. We need to change the way we think about wildlife. We need to get away from the emotions of sustainable use. We need to get away from the emotions and the divisiveness of whether hunting is good or bad, which is an extraordinary situation when all first world countries have some kind of sustainable use program. And how can it be that we cannot do this in our own country? But even if they were to put sustainable use today in Kenya, I believe it would be too late. It'll take too long for it to work, considering the resistance by the antis, for it to have a meaningful impact. So really all we are left with is payment for environmental services. We find that valuing wildlife by proxy, all you have to do is make it conditional that the payments depend on whether the wildlife is there, whether it's not being subdivided. We find that all you have to do is pay enough to just be a bit more income than the alternative land uses, such as monoculture, cattle, or agriculture. So we're not talking about extraordinary values we have to pay, like the value of rhino horn or those sort of things. It is just basically linked to what is actually they're able to do on the ground now. So if you were, for example, leasing land in the States, in the US of A, you would probably get 50 times the land in Africa for that same amount of money that you would, in the US. So please consider PES as a priority in your deliberations on the way forward for wildlife in Africa, especially in areas with no governance or little governance. We do find that the direct transfer of money to the landowners, where the money is not funneled through committees and bank accounts, is the answer for a corruption-free process. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.